Hello. Thank you for joining us again here at Grace Community Church. Some of you may know we have resumed in-person services for those who are comfortable attending in person. We have everything spread out, socially distanced in here. Masks are required when you're not sitting down. And so if you're comfortable attending in person, that service is now available. But for the time being, we'll also be providing this service as well for those who may be immunocompromised or just don't feel comfortable yet gathering in person. We respect anybody's decision based upon what they want to do. And so I appreciate you joining us here in this way, and we'll see where we go, right? So one of the things I've been mentioning last week and the week before is that the journey that I'm specifically on, as you know, if you've been paying attention for the last few months, is being a peacemaker, becoming a peacemaker. And part of that journey was also realizing that there's no way to be a peacemaker. You just need to be a peacemaker, right? So this idea of blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called children of God. Okay, so now we need to be peacemakers. So how do you become a peacemaker? And learning how to be a peacemaker instead of just being a peacemaker. And it reminds me of this story I heard a long time ago, and it was kind of a parable story about this small town that was having a lot of financial difficulty. And they were trying to figure out how they could boost their economy to keep the town alive. And since they had a main river that had a lot of fish in the river, they decided that they should become a fishing town. And they would be known for fishing and, catching fish and selling fish and fishing industry, and that was going to be the way that they saved their town. And so they started, researching about fishing, how to fish, where to fish, what rod to use, what line to use, what reel to use, what time of day to fish, what bait to use, and going to different conferences all around the area about fishing. And then one day a kid in the town just went out and went fishing, and he caught a fish. And so then they brought the kid in, and they interviewed this kid and asked him, what bait did you use, what line did you use, what reel, what rod, where did you fish, what time of day was it, what was the temperature like? And they just kept going on studying fishing. And then one day the town ran out of money. And they said, what happened? We had this great plan of boosting our economy through the fishing industry. Where did we go wrong? And the kid looked at him and he says, you never actually fished. All you did was talk about fishing. And so for me, that was part of my realization. I was doing all this time trying to figure out how to be a peacemaker and studying peace and what is a peacemaker instead of just being a peacemaker. And so that comes with this recognition that you just need to be present, right? It's all about being still and knowing that I am God. My grace is sufficient for you. This is the day that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad. And all of these scriptures are talking about just being present, just being. Stop trying to figure out who you are and just be who you are. Stop trying to figure out why you're here. Just be here. And and so one of the things I mentioned last week is I want to try to find, these phrases, these verses that we can use to meditate on, or we can use for centering. We talk about centering prayer. Centering prayer is basically meditation, but anytime when you're in centering prayer and your mind begins to wander, right, thoughts come into your mind, you lose focus on what you're doing, which is going to happen. It's 100% natural. It's what the brain is supposed to do. It's supposed to think. But we have these verses that we use to come back to center. Anytime we've noticed we've drifted off into thought, we use this verse to come back to center. My grace is sufficient for you. And we just meditate on that. And we just keep saying, my grace is sufficient for you. Be still and know that I am God, and go on and on. And so, meditation in this way, oftentimes we think of meditation as it's a Buddhist thing, it's a Hindu thing, but meditation is foundational to Christianity, foundational to Judaism, which Christianity grows out of, right? It's just such an important part of just taking time out of our day to just be still. 25, 30 minutes, however long you can do it, maybe 15, 10 minutes. It doesn't matter how long you do it. What matters is that you take time each day to just turn it off and just be still and give the Lord your presence. Right? To just be present with Him in this form of prayer. Prayer is not, God give me this, God do this, God do that, God do this, God help with that, God look over this. And once again, I'm not saying that's not prayer. That's not all prayer is. Prayer is just being present. It's just intentionally taking time to just be quiet, to be still, and to give God your presence. And these verses can just help us center. When our mind, when we're in this time of meditation, and our mind begins to wander, which it will, which is completely normal and natural, we just use that verse to come back to center. And so each week as we go through, I don't know how many weeks we're going to do this, because once again, it's not, I don't have this all mapped out and scripted out. It's week by week. But we're going to continue to try to find a verse that may connect with you, it may connect with me. Hopefully they all connect in each way, and we can all do this journey together, which this verse that we'll share today becomes that verse for this week. And anytime that you're taking this time in meditation, you're using this verse, to help center in that time. And so today we're going to be in John 14, and it's going to be verse 27. And actually, verse 27 has two of them. There's two of these kind of what we call maybe a mantra or whatever, a centering verse. Verse 27 has two of them, and we'll go through that. So verse 27 of John 14 says, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you," which is the first one. Peace I leave with you. Jesus has left us His peace. His peace He has given to us. We have peace. It's His peace. Right? We always talk about, what is the way to peace? Jesus is the way. Jesus is peace. And it's His peace. And it's in us. And He's given it to us. My peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. So we can just say that over and over and over. Peace He gave to me, my peace I give to you, however you want to say it. But just focus on, when you're going through a struggle, you're having a rough week, anxiety's getting the best of you. Just take some time to be still and just meditate on His peace that He left with us, His peace that He's given to us. The verse goes on. It says, not as the world gives do I give to you. Let not your heart be troubled, neither let them be afraid. This is the next one. Let not your heart be troubled. And do not be afraid. We are so consumed, all of us, and it's once again, it's just a function of the world. We're so consumed with fear. We talked about it a little bit, I think last week and maybe even the week before. We live in the past to try to dictate our future, mostly out of fear, mostly out of this anxiety about, making sure that whatever happened to us in the past isn't going to happen in the future, and trying to be in control. Because if I can focus on what happened to me back then I can control what's going to happen to me in the future. And when we live like this, I mentioned this last week, we're not being present. And this is all about, this whole Christian journey is all about learning to be present, learning to be still. We talked last week, the birds of the sky, they do not toil, nor do they reap, but yet God feeds them. And how much more does He care about us than He does about the birds? The lilies of the field are dressed more beautifully than any human being. And yet they don't do anything. They just get it, and one day they will grow up, and the next day they're cut off and thrown into the furnace. How much more is he going to take care of us? Right? So instead of living in the past to dictate the future, we just need to be present. And we just need to live in peace. Right? This understanding that yesterday is over. It doesn't exist anymore. It's over. Tomorrow doesn't exist yet. It's not there. It doesn't happen. There is no tomorrow. There's only today. And today we want to live in peace. Peace in our heart. Don't let your heart be troubled. Don't let your heart be at war with itself. Don't have this inner struggle. All a lot easier said than done. We know that. That's why we have to work at it. We have to spend time. We have to be intentional about our prayer life. We have to be intentional about taking time out of each day and being present with God. Because once again, God doesn't have to be present with us. He already is. We're never not in God's presence. God is never not present with us because God doesn't exist in the future. God doesn't exist in the past. God exists in the present. We spend most of our time existing in the past and existing in the future, not just being present. And so Jesus is saying, peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you, not as the world gives, right? Because the world, was once again, here's another time where Jesus is saying, not physically, but spiritually. Jesus isn't promising us physical peace. He's not promising us an end to violence and war physically. He's promising us a spiritual peace. Because once again, Jesus is always talking in spiritual terms. The problem for the last several hundred years, because once again, for the early years of the Jesus movement in the Middle East, people had some understanding of this. Some people, not all. Once again, a lot of these gospel stories are a lot of people who just weren't understanding. But there was an understanding that Jesus was talking spiritually, and somewhere along the line, we've lost that. And we've gone back to being Nicodemus and the others that I pointed out many, many times, of hearing what Jesus is saying and thinking that it's physical. We hear him talk about his second coming, and we think it's physical, even though he clearly lays it out that it's going to be spiritual. Jesus didn't come to establish a physical kingdom on the earth. He came to establish a spiritual kingdom. He's going to return physically one day, yes, once his spiritual kingdom is fully established by us, which is the work that we're going to do that is greater than the work that he did. So when Jesus is saying, my peace I give to you, it's not necessarily a physical peace. It's a spiritual peace. It's a peace that we can have internally with ourself. We can be at peace with our true self. We can be at peace. Remember we talked about a long time ago, the hakeatos, our thisness, the image of God in which we were created. That is where we can be at peace. But as long as we continue living out of this false self, this image that the world has created us in, we're never going to have peace. Because that false self, as Thomas Merton will say, is entirely unknown to God. Because it wasn't created by God. So Jesus can say things like, let not your hearts be troubled, because I've given you my peace. And my peace is me, in you, the hope of glory. And I know most of us on some level, are plagued by some anxiety and some fear. A lot of us have had a lot of little t traumas in the past that we live in. We live in those little t traumas. And we use those to try to control what's going to happen in the future. It's all anxiety. There's no peace in living that way. Richard Rohr says all great spiritual growth is about letting go. Letting go of the past. Letting go of our traumas. Letting go of the hurts and the pains that have existed in the past. Because once again, we'll always have the memories of them. We'll always have the memories. The memories will never go away. But what can go away is the woundingness, the pain, and the trauma of the memories. And if we can let go of that, and we can learn to stop living in that pain, stop living in that trauma, and just be present with the Lord, present with Christ in us, the hope of glory, we will recognize and understand the peace that He left with us, the peace that He gave with us. Our hearts will no longer be troubled. We will no longer be afraid. Because in the present, there's nothing to be afraid of. Right? There's a lot of things to be afraid of in the future, right? Another virus may come, a super volcano, solar flares, an asteroid striking the Earth, losing your job, getting cancer, your car not starting in the morning, not knowing how you're going to pay your mortgage or your rent next month, not knowing when your next meal is going to come from. Once again, little f fears and big F fears. They're all fears. And they're all in the future. And they're all distracting us from the present. And they're all troubling our heart. Because in the present, there's no reason for our hearts to be troubled. In the present, there's no reason to be afraid. Because in the present, we have His peace. So I really want you to take time every single day this week to just be still, get in a comfortable chair, lay on the floor, lay in bed, however you can be comfortable and be still. Begin to take several deep breaths in through the nose, feeling your body fill up with air and harden by that air. And begin to exhale through the mouth, feeling your body let go of the stress and the tension, and your body softens. Do that 3 to 4 times. And then just focus on your breath, breathing normally. Just noticing the in and the out. Yahweh, Yahweh, Yahweh. And then use your breath. Let not my heart be troubled. Let not my heart be troubled. My peace I leave with you. My peace I leave with you. And just use those verses as a way to center yourself in that stillness. Because once again, your mind is going to begin to wander. It's normal. But just use these verses to come back to center. And if you can do this every single day, you'll just start realizing how much more present you're being, how much more present you're being with your spouse, how much more present you're being with your coworker, how much more present you're being with your dog or whoever you have in your life. You will begin to notice you're just being present. Because no matter who is in your life, all they want from you is your presence, including God. All God wants is your presence. And you cannot be present with God if you're so distracted by everything that's going on in the world. You're not present with God if you're living in your past, trying to dictate your future. And all God asks of us is to be present with Him. Being present and using this meditation, using this centering prayer, whatever you want to call it, is the easiest way to learn how to be present. So take some time. John 14:27. Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. Let not your hearts be troubled, neither let them be afraid. Because Christ is with you. Amen.